welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our communities. What did they do to get started, and what are they doing to stay there? And today, oh my goodness, we are in season 3. We're celebrating the 100th episode. Let me say that again. The
100th episode.
This is so fantastic. I've got my glasses here. I'm with my good friend today, Beth Jee. She is she's an expert in staffing. She works for Partnership Employment. She's also a volunteer leader for the Mid-Cities HR Association. Hey, we're going to flip the script today. I'm so excited. I'm a little bit nervous.
You should
excited.
be. You should be very nervous.
We're going to have so much fun. Super excited and super honored to be at number 100. And so flipping the script, what does that mean? That means that I'm going to give Beth the microphone. She's going to ask me some questions. We're going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about the podcast. We're going to talk about a whole lot more. And so, hey, let's go ahead and get started. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you. It's clear vision. So why are we wearing these? Because we've got a great vision for the future. Welcome. It's Bruce's 100th episode for this podcast.
Hey, I was going to say, oh my gosh. I was going to say real quick, I always like to start off the show. And I know I'm going to hand you the microphone.
I know you are.
But I do like to start off the show reflecting about, when did we first meet? Like, when did I first meet the guest on the show? Or when did they come into my path? And for you, it's been many years. And I recall the first time I met you was at a Dallas HR meeting.
It sure was.
And you were getting ready to have some babies, I believe. Do you remember that?
I was, but you know what? Not to even call you on this, but it was before. He just doesn't remember. But he was right. It was a Dallas HR meeting. We were sitting at the same table during a lunch.
Yep.
And that's how we met.
Yeah, I remember that. And I said, hey, I was on a committee at the time, and you said, well, tell me about that committee. And I thought, wow, she's already asking some good questions. I need to find out the answer. So anyway, super excited to be here. I have been looking at the last 99 episodes and just absolutely in awe of all the guests that have been on the show. So I'm looking forward to just doing this episode. So, hey, I'm going to hand the mic to you, Beth.
Hand it over. So if any of you guys have been watching this Life in the Leadership Lane podcast, you'll know that there are a few questions that Bruce asks people, but has anyone out there ever wondered what Bruce's answers were? So we're going to ask some questions you guys are familiar with. We're going to ask Bruce about his perspective on a lot of things, and we're going to ask Bruce about what he sees for the next 100 episodes. So Bruce usually starts this podcast off with these great people, HR professionals, as we know, and he always says, tell me, where are you from? So Bruce, tell me, where are you from and how did you get to Dallas?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And listen, I came from the great state of Oklahoma. My parents are bowling center proprietors. I've talked about it on the show before. Mm-hmm. They have been instrumental in my career when it comes to showing me what hard work looks like. That my father, a lot of people talk about me creating content. My father is a content creator. Working at the bowling center, he's always thinking of specials for the bowlers. Hey, how can we get bowlers in? How can we get them excited? How can we get them energized about the great game of bowling? And so I think I got a lot of that from him. And then my mom, she is a connector. A lot of people talk about me being a connector. You watch her work the bowling center room. She works the room like no other. She's an encourager. She's also a hard worker. So both of them also are Hall of Famers. And so I've learned so much from them. So my career really started out in the bowling industry. And then of course, I have 7 brothers and sisters that are all, from doctors to educators to professionals. They've all been very, very successful. And I'm so just proud of all of them. Early on, I was trying to find my lane. I went to college. And my first year, I met the love of my life. I met a girl in college, and we got married and started a family. And so I put my education on pause. And, I wonder, a lot of time at that time, you're wondering like, man, this is really tough as I was going through that. Mm-hmm. But then I look back later, and now I'm able to help people with my story. And that is, hey, I went for a year, I put it on pause, I started a family. And then 4 years later, I went back to college. And I finished my degree with, 3 kids later. And then my brother was in the moving and storage industry in Dallas, Texas. And so I decided that, you know what, bowling may not be my lane.
May not be your lane.
So I decided, hey, you know what, I'm going to try the relocation lane. And so I moved to Dallas in 1995 and been here ever since. And it's been incredible.
I love that. So I feel like what I've heard with Bruce sharing, that we know that his great personality is from some wonderful parents that taught him very young to not give up, to be a connector, right?
Yeah, for
and we learned how he got to Dallas, which I never knew that story either. So Bruce started this podcast, 100 episodes, and I'm going to ask, talk to me about, how did you start this podcast?
You know, isn't that interesting though, how we've known each other for many, many years, but yet you didn't know that story. And I think that's one of the things, and we're going to talk more about some of the stories, but that's one of the things I've enjoyed probably the most is learning from so many people. I mean, I've known them for many for a short time, many for a long time, but I learned, we all of a sudden now we get to really dive in deep to their story and learn more about them. And it's incredible. So about the podcast, 100 episodes. This is fantastic. So how did I get started? I will tell you that I've always had, you can call it a dream. I've always had this thought of being the Jay Leno in the workplace. So for you young people out there, Jay Leno, that's the new Jimmy Fallon, right?
Yes.
But Jimmy Fallon, I love Jimmy Fallon too. So, but I remember there was an episode and Jay Leno would say, hey, I'm going to push it to you, Bob. Bob's out on the street. And he was talking to people and asking them questions. And I thought, wow, wouldn't that be great to walk into someone's office and ask them a question about the workplace? Like, what are your successes, or what are your challenges, or something? And during that time, I just, it just wasn't the right season for that. Many times we have a dream and we put that on our, dream list, but it's just not the right time. Well, then 2020 came.
2020 came.
And we all know what happened in 2020.
Quite a few things.
This pandemic. And all of a sudden, a lot of times, so for me in my business, I was very purposeful in meeting and networking and connecting with people, but all the Starbucks closed. The workplaces, many of them closed. And I was like, how am I going to stay connected? How am I going to stay educated? Because when I meet with someone like yourself, I learn,
you
right?
do.
And how can I stay visible? And, I'd been a guest on some podcasts before. I thought about it and I thought, you know what, now may be the time. And so I basically started, first and foremost, I said, I think I'm going to do it. So I made the decision, I'm going to start a podcast, because I think that's the first thing when we decide to do something, we got to decide.
Right.
That's what I want to do. And so what's the next step? Well, next step is seeking wise counsel. So I just started talking to different people, Kevin Dawson with Leaders and Loggers. He was the very first guest I had on the show. Talked to him and said, hey, what do you do? What did you do? And I talked to Tony Bridwell, who was a guest on the show, and he has Breakfast with Sis, and talked to different people. I had a good friend of mine, Chrissy Connor. She said, hey, you ought to talk to my friend at Red Paw Creative. And she was able to help me navigate me through, hey, here's the technical part of it.
Sure.
And I think that's the thing that a lot of us struggle with whenever it comes time to starting something new, is it's like, but I don't know how. And so I once heard Jim Rohn say, the bigger the why, the easier the how. And so all of a sudden I started thinking about this why, like, why do I want to do that? Well, I want to connect with people during this pandemic. I want to have purposeful conversations. And so reached out, Caitlin helped me, Caitlin Stringer she's actually with the Red Paw Creative. She's incredible, out of Oklahoma. She helped me put together the thumbnail. She helped me put it on my website. And then she said, here's the editing software. And what could feel like a mountain, she made into a small hill for me. She's like, hey, listen, it may take you a few episodes to get it, but that's okay. You're going to get it. And so that's really how that got started. And then I forced to launch my first episode in April. Funny story.
Give it to me.
So I had Adrienne Court on the show during season 1. Adrienne Court, she's Chief Human Resources Officer. And she said something that really stuck with me. And I thought, that's what I did to get started.
Okay.
And she said this: many people try to get it 100% before they start. And she said, people that really have success, they use this OTL approach.
What is OTL?
Well, OTL, I'm glad you asked, because OTL is over the line. She said this. She said, we just needed to get it at least 85% there. And then once you get it 85%, you go with it. And then you can start like changing the tires and making adjustments along the way to get to 100%. And that's what I did. And I'll give you an example. The very first show, I was actually trying to figure out what I want to call my podcast, but I didn't have a name. I said, hey, it's Leading Leaders. My very first episode, you go back and listen to it. And I told Kevin after the show, I said, listen, this really feels good. I really enjoy this, but that Leading Leaders just doesn't really sound like. And he said, yeah, he said, you got your book, Find Your Lane. And I said, yeah. And I really like that song, Life in the Leadership, Life in the Fast Lane. Right. Yes. And he said, well, hey, why not Life in the Leadership Lane? And that's how Life in the Leadership Lane name was actually born. So shout out to you, Kevin. I appreciate that. But my point here is this. If it's 85%, that's okay. You just push it over and just see where it takes you. And then I would say the last couple of things is you got to take action. You got to be consistent. And then you just got to stay committed through the process. And I think that's what I've done with the podcast.
So it's really interesting to hear kind of the common threads that you're talking about, right? That you put out a goal and you figured out the steps to get to the goal and what that looks like. So now that you've done this 100 times, what are you most proud of? What are you most proud of doing this podcast?
Oh my gosh. Most proud of, I'm proud of so many things. You know what? I'm proud that it's more than a podcast.
I love it.
And I like to tell people you know what this is? This is free coaching from some of the best high achievers in the business community. And I'm so proud that we put that out because you wouldn't believe the texts and the emails and the messages I get from people that listen to the podcast that I didn't even know listen to it. I'm proud of the connections that I've built on the show, that most everybody, we've become friends. Like we've gotten to know each other, and that's the first step to anything is developing trust, building relationships. And this has been a great relationship builder.
Well, I'm going to jump in for a minute. I think what's interesting with this too, Bruce, is that you've built a community. Yeah. So I've talked to many people who've watched your podcasts, and we've reflected on things that we've learned and things that we've heard. When you share things to me, the bigger the why, the easier the how. Is that what you just told me?
That's right.
And it sticks with you, right? So not only have you made this like great network of friends, you've also created a community of viewers, right? That we've watched, and we've taken little nuggets of information and we've applied it to our day to day. So you've really also built a community.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
That's a great thing.
I'm proud of that. I'm also proud of the mission. I have a mission to continue to move leaders to inspire and change the workplace. And I feel like we can do that. You know what else I'm proud of?
Okay, tell me, because I got a lot more questions.
I'm proud of the opportunity to have my mom on the podcast, episode 37, the end of season 1.
Yes.
I had my daughter on the podcast, Allison Rosenti's, episode 50. And then my oldest son, Adam, I had him on the show, episode 75. I'm proud to be able to have those conversations and record those and share those with the community. And there's so many things. So I appreciate you asking that question.
Yeah. So not only are we changing the world by providing this coaching platform, you've made a little bit of history with your family. You've created this amazing community for us listeners, right? Who've learned so much and have met some great people ourselves. But what are one or two things that from this podcast that you've gained that you didn't see coming? Like it just blindsided you out of the blue. I'm going to give you two things from this podcast. That's like, okay, give me two things that you've gained from this podcast.
I have a lot, but I will say the very first one is, I'm just going to hold it up right here.
Please do.
Is the book, Life in the Leadership Lane, Moving Leaders to Inspire and Change the Workplace. I wrote my first book, Find Your Lane, in 2017. I am so proud of that book.
It's a great one.
And I thought I may write another book one day. I did put out a journal in 2019, but I didn't have this in mind. And because of this podcast, I was able to put this book out, and I just remember thinking, there's so much wisdom. I've got to find another way to get it out there. And so that's number one. And then number two, it's just given me another platform to provide content for the business community.
No, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, you don't have a blooper reel. I've looked for it. I haven't found one, but I would like to know, and I bet there are people out here too. I want to hear about a couple of flubs. What have been some flubs that you're like, but you learned from them, or that you still look back and you laugh at them? So give us some of those.
Funny. I hope one's not right now.
No, we're not flubbing. We're good. We're moving forward.
I will tell you, man, listen, I have failed my whole life and learned so much from it. As we talk about this, I've had a moment, and I'll share that. But one of the things that I always think about before I turn on the podcast, before I hit the record button, I always think to myself, please let my internet work for the whole hour.
Sure.
And I hope my record button works as well and captures this. If I can just get those two, oh man, this is going to be great.
Golden.
And so a funny story. I believe it was episode 2, interviewed a good friend of mine, Greg Hawks. He's the president of his company, Hawks Agency. And, of course, early on, I'm reaching out to friends, because I'm trying to test this thing.
Absolutely.
And Greg, he's incredible. He's a keynote speaker. He's a trainer, really expert in culture. And I've known Greg for a long, long time. And so I said, hey, I did my intro and I said, hey, welcome to the show. And we went into the show and Greg was he was in a zone. He was just in this deep conversation, sharing. And I looked up in the corner of as I'm looking right now, and it says recording. Okay. And I noticed it didn't say recording. And he was it's one of those speakers, you're like, I can't interrupt him. No. He's in the zone. And so anyway, I just said, hey, Greg, of course he said, hey, what's going on? I was like, man, I am so sorry. Man. I have not been recording this.
And how do you recreate that, right? So
right.
much of this delicious content just comes from conversation.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because it's not going to be the same. And so, but also people are very busy people. And so we were 20 minutes into it and I thought, does he even have time to, do another 30 minutes? And of course he was gracious and that worked out. And I've had a couple of others where phones have gone off.
Sure.
And I'm like, hey, that's okay. I'm editing, but that was a moment for me during that time. And I have a chapter in my book called It's Growth Day. And I talk about that story because I like to share that. Listen, we're going to have failures. We're going to try things new. Okay. We're going to try things new and we're going to fail from it. But we're going to learn and we're going to get better and we keep going and going and going. Next thing you know, you're at 100 episodes.
You know what? Or a strike. Did you guys know that Mr. Waller here, how many perfect games have you bowled?
Yeah. So I've bowled 10 perfect games that are sanctioned.
Yes.
That are actually sanctioned 300 games. Thanks for bringing that up. But I always tell people, what's my favorite one? It's my next one. Okay. So I'm hoping there's an 11th one someday.
But I think that correlation to that is that we're all going to throw a gutter ball, right? But we just keep going.
Oh man, I don't know if I can. A gutter ball? You mean maybe get 2 or 3 pins? Or you really a gutter ball?
A gutter ball.
Oh. No, actually, funny story. I went bowling with the Texas SHRM group not too long, and I actually threw it in the gutter, and it was I was like, I don't normally do that. What's going on here?
Right,
So,
right.
no,
but it just shows you that the best of the best, we fall, but you know what? We get back up. And how many pins did you hit the next time?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Was it a strike?
Yeah.
The next one was a strike?
Yeah.
I knew
Well,
it.
it's actually called a spare.
Oh, it's a spare. Oh, that's right. Because the first one was a
second.
0.
It's okay.
Absolutely.
It's okay.
Absolutely. I
You're still
love
a
that.
baller.
It's a comeback story, which is good. I'm a waller and a baller. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about what's been your best resource in putting this all together.
Oh, best resource. I'm just gonna share. When you talk about resources, you're talking about this podcast. I have one word that I think of when you say that, and that's my network.
Oh, wonderful. Tell me more about that.
Well, the reason why I say that is because I think, people hear me say your network is your net worth. I mean, look around at all the people all of the people you work with,
Hey,
all the people.
Will you say that again?
Your network
Right in the
is your
camera.
network. Your network is your net worth. That's
Your
right.
network is your net worth. Okay. I just had to put it out there again.
Yeah. I mean, and you really think about it. I mean, when you look around at the people you work with, when you look around at the people that you are with out of the workplace, I mean, your friends and in the Mid-Cities HR community, Texas SHRM community, it's, those are the people that lift you every day, that help you get to where you're going. And so I started thinking about, resources. You had asked me about that. And I started thinking about, well, for example, so you have referred many guests on the show.
Absolutely.
You called me and you said, hey, I really like this show. I know some people make a great guest. I know LaToya Watley, who is a VP of HR. Annie Corolla, who was on the show. She's a leader in talent acquisition. I know Kristen Cannon was absolutely fantastic. She's been on the show. She's a leader in talent acquisition. I think Jed Gifford,
yes,
is Sizzle. I remember Jed being on the show, and you had probably some others as well. But I've had guests on the show that have referred people. I've had business partners. I've had customers. And it's because they know like the value that these people have, and they're like, hey, get them on the show, have them share their value, and it's just going to help everyone. And so I would say by far my number one resource is my network, and I cannot wait to see what all referrals my network has going forward. I mean, just continuing to add value for the audience.
No, which is good. And it's back to that network and community that you're creating from this podcast.
Yeah.
So you've done 100 shows.
Yeah.
Here's my next question. Are you ready?
Yeah.
So from all of these amazing professionals, coaches, HR leaders, you've had, a mixture of guests. Can you pinpoint about 3 or 4 or 3.5 themes that you've kind of heard repeatedly? Like, these are the things that keep coming up.
One of the things that I do notice is that high achievers, they understand that they are not just HR leaders or talent acquisition leaders, that they're business leaders. I think that's the one comment, and I've taught, I remember when I took my PHR certification, Barbara Hoover, she said the very first thing you need to understand the business. And all of these I call them high achievers. They understand their business. They know that they are serving HR, they're serving talent acquisition, they're serving different areas, but they are business leaders. They understand what really drives the business. I think that's first and foremost, one of the things that I think is a common thread. As a matter of fact, I love playing some of their social clips. When I have the show, I'll basically record the 35 to 45 to 55 minute show. And then during the week, I'll take a clip that I feel like will make impact, and I'll put it out there on social. Well, now I've started doing some presentations in the different communities, and I'm bringing some of those clips with me. And what's really neat about that is that I'll be on stage and I'll say, hey, you're not just hearing it from me. Right. Let's hear it from, Diane Sanford and how she talks about belief, or let's hear it from Annie Corolla, or let's hear it from Steve Brown on why you should volunteer, or Dawn Cunningham. So I'm, and I walk up on stage and I say, hey, it's not just me today. I've got 5 guests with me today. And so I think that's number one. They all really understand the business. I've also learned that mentors are part of everyone's journey.
Okay.
On life and leadership lane. Like, we'll talk about mentors, but everyone has a mentor, has had mentors that have shaped their life. And I think it's good reflection on, wow, they really should, it puts them in a state. I've had a guest at the end of the show say, hey, I really enjoyed going through that process, because I hadn't thought about it in a long time. And I'm like, you know what, you need to reach out to your mentor. But not only have they had mentors and they share how mentors have helped them, but they're also mentoring others. And I think that's important. And I think, at the end of the day, that we're all, and the third thing is we're all going through, here's what I've learned. We're all going through the same thing, right? And this is just a way to talk about it and just just like learn, like hear different perspectives. And just learn more about, oh, well, I didn't realize, Beth, that you do it this way. We do it this way. Maybe I can apply something from that so we can get a little bit better as well. And so I think those are the things I've probably learned that are all like common threads.
Okay. So just to recap, we talked about business, right? We talked about mentors. And then the third one, I don't even know how to put that in a word.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the way they put that is just we're all going through the same thing.
Right.
Yeah.
I love it.
We're in this together.
We're in this together.
And so whether I'm talking about the Great Resignation, or whether I'm talking about engagement, whether I'm talking about attracting talent, whether I'm talking about leadership development, developing talent, we're all doing some of that, right? We're all trying to add value to our organization, right? Through people, with people, and for people. And so I think at the end of the day, the thing to realize is this: there's other people going through what you're going through. There's help all around us. All we got to do is tap on the shoulder and say, hey, by the way, how can you help me do this better? Or listen to the show.
Absolutely. Well, I think the thing that I always take away from it is that you always remind us to stay active in our communities, but to stay active through the process. It's one thing, anybody can sit back and complain, but I always feel like when we're faced with problems, you've created this platform in a community that we can go back and watch previous podcasts, and the way you lay it out, you can just jump into one and say, I'd love to listen about this. I'd love to listen about volunteering or retention or hiring or corporate culture. I think that's one of the things I've really enjoyed your podcasts for the last year.
Yeah, well, especially whenever we're in the state of you're hearing a lot about remote work, right? And so some companies have everybody back. Some are bringing them back in tiered modes. Some people have said, hey, you know what, we're just going to keep, we're not coming back. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that HR leaders or business leaders are handling that. And so now you can kind of get perspective on, well, I heard Joy on the podcast, and she talked about how, they had 20,000 employees, and then a month later they had 2,000. And how they built that back up, or some different companies talking about the different ways they're handling things. So yeah, I think you're right on there.
Yeah, I feel like it's a bit of a cliff note. I feel like your podcast is kind of a cliff note of like, how can we get through? Do you need some great ideas? But you don't have to live through the whole experience. You've got the professional, right? The specialist. What did you use? What term did you use for that?
That's right. Expert.
That can give you their playbook, right? Here are my notes.
Yeah.
And that to me is like a very valuable morsel, but I'm going to switch the gears and the lane that we're going down and the lane that we're going to go down is everyone listening, it's going to learn a little bit more about what Bruce does for a living. So are you ready to jump in?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So Bruce, tell us, what industry are you in and what do you do?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So I work for a company called Armstrong Relocation and Companies. My title is Vice President of Corporate Relocation, but really what I do is I serve customers that are relocating talent, whether it's across the street, to another town, to another state, across the US or around the world. Getting ready to celebrate 65 years, headquartered out of Memphis, Tennessee, for 30 operating companies in 19 states, largest agent for United Van Lines.
That's amazing. How many years have you been there?
Yeah. And so believe it or not, I am just celebrating my 18th year with Armstrong Relocation. And so what I do is I really serve in three different areas. The first area is if someone like you says, hey, Bruce, I need to move personally, so I can help you with your moving, whether you're moving from, across the street or across town. And so that we call that residential moving. The second area is I help companies whenever they need to move their offices. Maybe you need to move from one floor to another, or you need one building to another building. We do that. But I spend the majority of my time helping companies relocate their talent whenever they're moving someone to a new location, or they're hiring someone that needs to be relocated. That's what I'm doing. So my role is to come in and build these partnerships with, typically it's the head of HR, that is handling that relocation. Having said that, I've seen a lot of shift to talent acquisition. Many of my customers are in travel. And so the role though really, or the goal is really try to figure out how can we help them do it better, right?
I love it.
How can we manage, how can we help them manage their policy? How some of them may even need policy design, but how can we help them manage that? But at the end of the day, the ultimate goal is to give that employee a great experience. And so that's what I do. And, I do a lot of other things along the way, but that's really where I spend most of my time.
Which is great. What is most misunderstood about your industry?
Oh, man. I think the most misunderstood thing about our industry is that we're all the same.
Well, tell me a little bit more about
I
that.
really do. And when I think about that, I think, really relocation, it's not a commodity, it's a service. It's, we're in the moving industry. I mean, I sleep well at night because I know we have incredible people in our organization making things happen, from our key people in operations that are dispatching the crews and doing all the planning, to the guys that are, and the men and women that are out on the front line. I was just talking to somebody the other day. I mean, think about the driver of the year was gone for more than 250 days a year. So without we call them van operators, right? Okay. The drivers. And so without the van operators, nothing would happen, right? And so we have an incredible team of van operators, and they really, I feel like they really care about delivering that excellence every day. And so I think that's what's misunderstood. Armstrong's in a great position just because we're one of the largest agents. So we have a lot of resources. But having said that, I think at the end of the day, when you find the right partner, you've got a good partner and you can sleep at night. You don't have to worry about it. Everything's handled, and it is the moving business, right? So if something does happen, that you've got somebody that can work through the process with them.
It's funny, I referred someone to you and that you had personally called and taken care of it. And she will forever be in your debt. And she is like shared the story every time I see her. Because of you, she got to Texas, which is like a great place to be.
Well, first of all, I'm grateful to be in that position. And second of all, I'm grateful for you to refer anyone to us. I mean, that's the biggest compliment. But I will say this, if it weren't for the people in operations, and it weren't for the driver out there going that way, it wouldn't have got done. and so it takes a team. And that's why I think when you ask the question, what's often misunderstood, I think it's really that service level of companies. So I appreciate that.
You never really think about that. Okay, now I need you to listen to this question. Are you ready?
Okay.
It's a two-parter. What was your very first job?
Ooh, my very first job was working at the bowling center.
I love this. And what was your very first job at Armstrong?
My very first job at Armstrong Relocation was, so when I moved here in 1995, I started in operations. I got my CDL, I drove the truck, I loaded and packed the boxes. I worked in operations and I did that for about 8 years. When I came to Armstrong, I came to take a position in sales and marketing with zero business. I just stepped on that I took that leap of faith. But I knew I was going to be with a good company and I knew the industry. I just needed to go out there and find opportunities. And so to actually shape that a little bit more, my first job was to get on the phone and start calling people and letting them know, here's what I do and how can I help you and how can I serve you?
So how did that very first job at the bowling alley teach you and get you in for great success mode for your current job today?
Oh man, I will tell you that my very first job at the bowling center, my mother taught me about excellence. Okay. My mother and father. And so I would say a couple of things. Number one, listen to the customer, right? And I didn't say the customer is always right. I said, listen to the customer. Let's find out how we can solve their problem. So I shared this in my book, Mabel Carter. She bowled the senior league. She, when she had a ball stuck, I needed to go and get that ball
Physically
unstuck.
got it. That's right.
But taught me how to listen and figure out how can you serve them, because they've come to you for a reason. And so your job is to help them. And so I would say that, 14 years old was when I first started really working at the bowling. I say the bowling alley. My mother says it's a bowling center. So I've been taught to say the bowling center.
Sure.
And so my first job, I would say that to really provide that customer service, as well as clean the bathroom. Okay. Get that bathroom clean.
Wow.
My mom was a stickler for that.
That's
And so
wonderful.
that's helped me today, because when I'm serving customers today, I think of the same way.
Yeah. Life lessons from your first job to your current job.
Yeah.
I think they definitely tie in together.
That's a good curveball. I didn't know that
Thank
was
you so
coming.
much. I want you to tell me something about you that people who know you may not be familiar with about when it comes to your job.
Other than playing football against Troy Aikman, he just went to Monday Night
Football. Yes, he
Okay,
did.
yeah. So maybe he'll tell the story about when we played football together and I tackled him. Maybe not. Okay. And by the way, he's on my dream list. If anybody's out there listening, I would love to get Troy Aikman on the show. I will tell you that when I joined a moving company in 1995, I mentioned earlier, and I applaud the leader of the organization. He said, if you're going to be in sales, if you're going to be in management, you have to spend some time on the trucks. So I took a job in operations. I didn't realize spending time on the trucks meant for a whole year. And the dispatcher, he needed some more drivers. He said, Bruce, let's get your CDL. And I was like, okay, I didn't graduate college to be a driver, but I got my CDL. I drove on the trucks. I packed, I loaded, I moved people. I drove and did Texas Intra, worked in the warehouse. I was a dispatcher. I was a customer service coordinator. So all of these different things have helped me get to where I am today. And what's interesting about that is a lot of times, I talk to a lot of different people about, hey, what do you want to do in your career? And they're just not sure. And a lot of them though will immediately say, well, I want to be the director, or I want to be this, but they don't realize a lot of times it's picking up a lot of little rocks along the way.
Sure.
And so I think for me, that's what I did. And I look back and I can't pay for that experience. And at the time I remember thinking, man, I will say this to be transparent. I looked back a lot of times early in my career. I was like, why did I move to Dallas? I had it great at the bowling alley. I'm moving this sofa up 3 flights of stairs. It's 105 degrees in Dallas. It's 6 o'clock at night, trying to help this customer. And I could be back there in the air conditioning in the bowling alley, right? But I just kept pushing through. And a lot of times we talk about pushing through things, and we go back to what I said before, that why. And when the why's big enough, that's what gets you to push through things. And so for me, I was just trying to create something for my family. I was trying to make a living. I was trying to really make my mark, doing something different to where I could be with my family. And I said, this is the way, and I just got to push through it. So that was my why. My why was I wanted my family I wanted them to be proud of me and what I did in my career. And that was my why. So every time I had a challenge, I'd go back and I'd think about that, and it would just keep pushing me through. And that's what pushed me through today. So every time I take on something hard, a book, you have to have that why, and that why is what pushes you through.
So this is going to be a great question. Thank you for setting this up so well.
Oh.
So when did you find your lane?
Find your lane. I love how you said that. As a matter of fact, I brought my book today just so I could hold it up. Are you talking about this? Find your lane.
I am.
Find my lane.
When did you find your lane?
So I'm glad you asked that, because that's one of the questions I like to ask guests on the show is, hey, when did you find your lane? And when I talk about finding your lane, I'm talking about your calling, your purpose, right, in your career. And when I think about that, for me, I was 37 years old. I started at Armstrong Relocation. I just mentioned and it was in 2004, and I had no business, zero business. And so I just started calling all of my friends. Just like the podcast, right? Same thing.
Right.
You start
Same
calling, you go to
thing.
your network.
First
Your
job.
network is your
Yes.
net worth. So I start calling my friends, and a guy calls me up, Neil. I put this in my first book, Find Your Lane. And he says, "Hey, Bruce, hey, I got a lead for you." I was like, "Great. What do you got?" He said, "Well, my friend, he's a banker. He needs to move his mom out of some assisted living. And I told him you could help him." I was like, "Absolutely, I'll help you." And so anyway, long story short, I helped his mom move a couple of boxes, a small little dresser, and a little single bed from Dallas, Texas to Houston. And that's all the move was. I think there was I think I made like $7 on the move. I can't remember. But here's why I know I found my lane. Two things. One, I felt like before, when I first got in the moving industry, that I was talking to friends who were doctors. I would talk to professionals. I'm like, "Oh man, I wish I could do something that really made a difference." That was my mindset. But when I moved his mom, I took the stress, our company took the stress off of him. He didn't worry about his mom.
Nope.
And I thought that was the first time that I thought, wow, I can really make a difference doing that. Number one. Number two, I knew that day I was going to be successful in this business. I didn't know what that level of success would be, but I knew I'd be successful. And here's why. Because I was able to make my phone ring. It wasn't about the company's phone ring. They said, "Hey, Bruce, we got one for you."
Yes.
I was able to do that through a network, through referrals. And that's the way the world works.
Gave
right?
you a nibble of what a network can do for you.
Even people listening to podcasts, a lot of them are in the HR community, in the mobility community, talent acquisition. They all depend on the referrals. And so if you can build up a network, your net worth is going to build. Okay. And so that's the day that I really found my lane, other than, of course, when I got married and have my children and all of that. But in my career, that's the day I said, "You know what? I think I'm doing something that is making a difference. Now, how can I go do it better?"
That was a great answer.
Thank you.
That was really good.
Thank
Okay.
you.
We're at the point in this interview where Bruce always winds things up. It's wonderful. I love this time in your interview where you call it time to accelerate. I'm going to call it the final mile.
Does that mean we're getting close to the end of the show?
We are. I can't
Okay.
believe it. It's gone by
All
so
right.
fast.
Yes.
I've learned some amazing things about community, about great customer service, how your first job ties you into a career if you're
Yeah.
trained well,
Yeah.
right? To carry on forever.
Yeah.
How we need to be nice to our parents, right? Because they have had some great influence, and to keep your network flowing, which is amazing. And that your network is your net worth. I loved that.
Yeah.
That was a wonderful nugget I'm going to walk away with.
Yeah.
And the fact that I really appreciate you for so many reasons. And one is that you've created this great community, and these podcasts are amazing. But the one common theme, if you're going to ask me, that I always see that I really enjoy is that the guests that you've selected, they get it down to a level that it's super personable and you can relate to them as people as well as HR leaders.
Yeah.
But at the end of each one, you ask them how people can get in touch. And nobody says no. Everybody says, yes, get in touch with me. So for that final mile, we're going to jump on in. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're going to start with what makes you feel most inspired and what makes you feel like you are doing your best self. What makes you your best Bruce?
Honestly, I get inspired, and I'll also use the term energized when I'm around people, right? I mean, this right here is inspiring because I feel like we have joy, right, in our work. And so somebody put something on social media not too long ago and said, "Hey, I'm so inspired by this." And I said, when you're inspired, I'm inspired. And I think that's so true. Every time I meet with a guest, I will tell you that one of the things that I also find common, which is interesting, is many of these high achievers have not done a podcast before.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. And so so at the beginning of the podcast, they're like, "Hey, yes, I think I'm ready. Let's do this."
Yes.
And I love how they say yes and they jump in. right? We talked about the OTL.
Absolutely.
But when they get done, they're like, I'm so glad I did that.
Yes. No one regrets it, do they?
They don't, because they all have a comment thread. They say it's a great time of like reflection. And so that inspires me.
I love that.
Yeah.
So Bruce always asks this question: 10 years from now, you're standing at the door and you're opening the door to yourself. What do you say to yourself?
I love this question.
I love that I get to ask you this question. You're just great.
I love asking. I was just talking with Jessica Hare with the Dallas Regional Chamber. I was just talking to her recently about this, and she cried during that moment.
Oh,
Halima
I get
McWilliams
it.
has done the same thing. I'm like, you're not going to make me cry, Beth.
Yes.
This is great. I will tell you that as you asked me that question, though, I've thought about this many times, running in my neighborhood, thinking, what would I say? And I remember Yvonne Freeman was on the show. I think she was episode 15. Incredible leader. And she said, what she would say is, good job. And I just loved how she said that. It was just like, good job. And I thought, you know what? That's what I would say. I would say, you know what? I'm really proud of you, Bruce. I'm proud of the purpose you have in your everyday. I know that there's challenging times, but I also want to tell you there's more challenging times ahead. Okay. So I want you to just keep going, because our most important work is always ahead. So just keep doing. I was thinking about in the Bible, there's a book, Joshua, a guy by the name of Caleb. And he says this, and it's really resonated with me. I've shared this with a lot of people, and he calls out, give me this mountain. And the reason why he says that is because, like, I want something so big that I know I can't do it by myself. I want to lean in. I know I need you. I know I need help around me. And that's a lot of times, we don't go for big, right? Because I can't do that. But you can do that when you have people around you. And we've talked about this, like, been the theme of this, right? Mm-hmm. So I know that I can come to you, Beth. I've had many people on the show that I can just reach out to and say, hey, I've got something big here. Can you help me? And so I think that 10 years older is just going to say, hey, just keep leaning, keep connecting, keep growing, stay energized, keep lifting people, and good things are ahead. But it's going to be challenging, but you've got help around you.
It sounds to me that it's not always the safe choice that's the best choice, right?
Oh, I may be quoting that.
Come on.
I put a lot of the Life in the Leadership Lane quotes up in social. I love that.
It's true, though.
Yeah.
You've lived it. Yeah. You woke up one day and you're like, I'm going to start a podcast. And here we are at 100. I mean, serious. I mean, the safe choice was not the best choice for you. Yeah. The safe choice was to keep talking about it. Yeah. The right choice for you was to take that leap and to make it happen.
And now look.
At 100. Yeah. Okay, so we're driving on this highway, right? So we're in our lane. We're driving on this highway and we see a billboard, and it's your billboard. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's my billboard. What's your billboard say?
I've never had that question before. That's a great question. I've actually thought about, when driving by a billboard, like if our company was on it or a volunteer organization. I've never thought about Bruce. I think for me, as I think about that question, I think for me, that billboard would say, find your lane. And the reason why I say that, and I know that was the title of my first book, but here's the thing. When you find your lane and you find your real purpose, you're around the right people, you're doing the things you want to do, that brings joy, right? In your everyday, whether you're at work, whether you're at home, it just brings joy when you're doing the things that you want to do. And so that would probably, as I think about this, tomorrow I may have something different, but as I think about, I want everybody to find the lane that brings them joy. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as it brings them joy. And so that would be, I would tell you, a lot of times, I was thinking about Suzanne Meyer. She was on the show, and she, we talked about quotes. She always says it's the easy, hard stuff.
Oh, that's great.
Isn't that great? And
it's
I,
so
I tell
good.
people that all the time now, it's, finding your lane. It's easy, but it's so hard. Right.
Mhm.
And so that would be it'd be my billboard. Yeah.
That's a great billboard. I think we'd all drive by and honk and point and say, there's Bruce's billboard. There's Bruce's billboard. So we talked about life in the leadership lane.
Yeah.
And so we just hit 100. So what is the next, what's the next turn? It's not a U-turn. What do the next 100 episodes look like for you?
You would not believe the guests we have coming up on the show.
Tell me.
Incredible guests. I'll just give you I've got a great leader in Dallas, SHRM coming up. I've got my dream list. Funny story. I didn't talk about this, but one of the guests I had on my show was Bob Stoops, the Hall of Fame football coach.
I was about to say the one and only.
Yeah. And a lot of people know that I'm a, big Oklahoma Sooner fan. And so that was a big moment. That was the day I was like, please internet work, please recording work. And I remember how I got him on the show is that I had a list of what I call hopefuls or a dream list, right? And hopefully people listening will start a dream list, like whatever it is you do. And I had different people that I want to have on the show. Troy Aikman, I mentioned earlier, but I mentioned to some people, they interviewed me on a podcast, and I asked them at the end of the show, I said, hey, who else are you going to have? Like, who's a big name?
Yes.
And they said, well, we don't really have that. Do you have that? And I'm like, oh my goodness. Yeah. Let me start with President George W. Bush. I've got Troy Aikman. I got Bob Stoops. I'm going down. They went, well, I might be able to help you with Bob Stoops. And so that led me. So I'm just going to say this, hey, have a list. It doesn't matter. Like maybe it's a list of maybe you're in sales and you want a list of dream clients. Maybe it's a podcast. You want to dream people you want to have on the show. Maybe it's maybe you're in a HR position and you want to talk to a lot of different CHROs, whatever it is. Have that list and just, you never know, where to lead you.
Well, you know what? I just to kind of round this up, it's not so much as like making the list. We have all heard about Bruce making these lists, but let me tell you something I hear Bruce do all the time. He puts the list into action.
Yeah.
And that's the difference with you.
Yeah.
You made a list and you put it into the action, right?
Yeah.
And that's where it came. So not only is it just the list, it's making the list move.
I think at the end of the day, that's probably one of the takeaways I've had from my guests too, is that they all work hard. They put in the work. And I think at the end of the day, that's where, you have to do all the things we're talking about, right? You collaborate, you connect, you do all these different, but at the end of the day, you got to do the work. And it's a lot of hard work, but it's very rewarding.
Absolutely. Okay. Happy 100 and happy and next 100 episodes, right? That'll be right around the corner. We're so excited to see your future guests.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I will tell you at the end of the day, what I hope I can continue this. I hope I continue to get the texts from different people that say, hey, I just heard this on the show. I get somebody that sends me an email. I get somebody on social, from the book. It's been absolutely incredible. And I got to tell you, with the book, that's the Find Your Lane was my story. The Life in the Leadership Lane, that's everybody's story, right? And so at the end of the day, that's my hope, is to continue to share that message with everyone. And so, hey, I just want to say this as we wrap up here. I just want to say, Beth, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having this idea and having, and putting it to action, right? You said, hey, Bruce, early on.
I did.
Hey, Bruce, I want to interview you if there's ever the opportunity. And I said, hey, I've got you down if that ever happens. And then here you are, 100 episode doing it. I want to say thank you. Thank you for your company allowing us to come up. Partnership Employment. We're in this big office overlooking the skyline. This has been a big moment for me, and I'll always remember this. And I'm so grateful. Hey, but real quick, people know how to get a hold of me. How do they get a hold of Beth Jee? If they ever want to connect and say, hey, I loved what you said on the podcast. I'd love to learn a little bit more about you too. How would be the best way for them to connect?
For them to find both of us would be find us on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Our phone numbers are on there. Our emails are on there. I know that for you. I know that for me.
Yeah.
And we look forward to learning more. What I'm going to ask is that after you've watched this episode, to send Bruce some things that you've really enjoyed about his 100 podcasts? They've been amazing. I'd love for people to share with you what they've gotten out of it, because I've gotten out of so much.
I love that. And if you will go on, if you're listening to it on Apple, go on and write a review. I would love to see your review, and man, that would just make my day. And of course I share that with others. And so I just want to say thank you to everybody listening. Thank you to everybody watching. I'm so grateful for you being part of Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm grateful for you, not just listening and watching, but sharing with others and bringing others into the community. And I can't wait to see what's ahead. And so for that, I say thank you for your wisdom.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your questions were outstanding. And most importantly, thank you for your friendship.
Thank you for your friendship. And thank you guys for listening. Happy 100, Bruce.
Okay, see you guys.
Thanks. Bye.